The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we're looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking, one that's not afraid to give you the honest truth. And I have a guest for you today. I am so excited. Welcome, Siri.
Pleasure to be here.
You are my absolute favorite attorney, and I just have to do a thank you on blast here for what you did for me when I was at my worst. I was fighting the medical board and going up against that, and you gave me a free consultation and said, Paul, I'm willing to come and cross-examine all your experts there, but it's a kangaroo court. There's no victory. There's no win. They will find you guilty of something, fine you enormous fines. It's a closed hearing. We can't talk about it. I see no win. And I just have to thank you. Because of that, I was able to make the tough decision. I was in the fight because I knew I was right, and it was like for the principle of it all, but it was like a dead end. And so instead, we got to sue the medical board ourselves, and I got that massive pressure relieved. So massive thank you to you.
You should never have found yourself in that position to begin with for doing the right thing, but please.
You're the managing partner at Siri and Gimstad, a law degree from University of California, Berkeley School of Law. You were the editor-in-chief of the Berkeley Business Law Journal. You've clerked for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Israel. You've had high-profile cases challenging government mandates during COVID-19. Big advocate for informed consent. Huge fan. You did vaccine litigation. You've done civil rights class action lawsuits. And I think it was your team, your work that forced Pfizer and Moderna to release the COVID data that they wanted to keep hidden for 75 years, right?
Yeah, we forced the FDA to release it. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Most importantly, I'm so excited about your new book, Vaccines Amen, The Religion of Vaccines. We're going to dig into that. And I'm also going to ask you a question. A lot of our viewers are parents, and some of them experience this dilemma of they're in a state where they don't have any philosophical or religious exemptions. What do? We don't want to vaccinate. We'll touch on that because I'm interested in your legal perspective. But before we get to that, let's jump into the issues that the book has raised. We're always hearing that vaccines are safe and effective. I think you've done a great job dispelling that myth. Can you describe the safety testing of vaccines?
As I go through in detail in chapter 10, despite what they tell you about the clinical trials for childhood vaccines and for vaccines in general, one, not a single routine injected childhood vaccine has ever been licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial, meaning the control group got something inert. And that's critically important because if you want to assess the safety of a product, you have to compare it, a group that got the product to a group that got something inert, where you know the absolute safety. Not only that, when they used another vaccine as a control, which you could do if it was properly safety tested, that vaccine never went through a proper placebo-controlled trial, nor any other vaccine down the chain. That's just a fact. I know that they fact-checked that claim, but that is a fact. And I cite to every single FDA source document to support it for every single routine injected childhood vaccine. But here's the thing. Even if they had included a placebo control group in any of those trials, you still need to review safety long enough. And oftentimes they only review safety for days or weeks after injection. That's just not long enough to assess the safety of these products. And sometimes maybe up to 6 months, still not long enough when you're talking about a baby or a toddler. Even if they had a placebo control and they reviewed safety long enough, you still need to have enough kids in the trial, meaning it needs to be properly powered. And most of these trials don't have anywhere near enough kids to show that the benefits outweigh the risks. So not a single one of the clinical trials relied upon to license any of the routine injected childhood vaccines validated their safety before licensure. That's just a fact. It's plain to see when you actually look at the FDA documents and when you don't read CNN articles or the New York Times.
That is so powerful, and you spell that out so clearly. no proper placebos. The trials aren't long enough. They don't look at all health outcomes, right? I mean, they're underpowered, tiny sizes, and yet they publish this as if this is the science. And we were hearing that nonsense, follow the science. It was just garbage, right? I love the case that you make in your book that vaccines and vaccine science is more of a religion, not a science. And you start off by kind of talking about the high priests of vaccinology.
Yeah.
And maybe you can go a little bit into that and your
Sure.
deposition of Stanley Plotkin and how important that was.
I call it a religion because in many ways it is, in the following way. For example, they claim, no, vaccines have been robustly trialed before licensure, right?
Right.
Then when you confront them with the data, you say, hey, look, here is the clinical trial report for Recombavax HB, one of the only 2 Hep B vaccines you give to a newborn. It shows in black and white with letters that you can read, and it was licensed based on a clinical trial that monitored safety for 5 days after injection with only 147 kids, no control group. That's what it shows. That's what the package insert shows. That's what the clinical trial report shows. That's what the summary basis of approval shows. That's what the published study relating to the trial shows. That's what it all shows. Okay. The other vaccine, Hep B vaccine, was 4 days of safety monitoring. So you confront them with, whether it's the infectious disease doctor or the immunologist or whoever it is, some other, you name it, that I've deposed or folks that I deal with all the time on the, so to speak, who are the believers or who are part of this religion. And instead of the reaction being, oh, that's what the data shows, I should look at that. I should start thinking that's not the reaction you get. What you get is you get an emotional reaction, you get a disbelief, you get excuses, meaning you get the reaction that somebody would have when they have a belief, not when they're engaged in intellectual scientific exercise. With religion, everybody knows it's a leap of faith. People involved in religion understand that they are believing. Where do we come from? Where do we go after we die? The unanswerables. Mm-hmm. But these folks, what makes it so pernicious, they think they're being scientific. They think that what they know is based on data, studies, but it's not. It's just dogma, repetition, and belief. Yeah. And that's often why they have an emotional reaction when confronted with the data. That's why I call it a religion.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was mainstream trained pediatrician and I believed vaccines were safe and effective, but I had not looked at the data. And if I had tried, I wouldn't have been able to find it, right? That's what you've pointed out in this book. I mean, it is ridiculous that in all this time, there are no proper safety studies. You mentioned in the book, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, the 1986 Act. How did that affect this whole vaccine safety issue? Because I think it's a big problem. And then my second part of my question is, can we get rid of the darn thing? What do you recommend?
The 1986 Act is an incredible problem. I'll start with the second question. It's an act of Congress, and so Congress would have to repeal it. I'm sure everybody in your audience already knows that the 86 Act is the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, and it was passed in reaction to all of the injuries that were being caused by the then only 3 routine vaccines. That's it. OPV, MMR, and DTP. That's all there was back then. But they were causing so much harm, so much, and hence so much liability for the companies making them, that every single company that was making those 3 products was going out of business or stopped making them until there was only one left. Now, that happens to industries. They face a fork in the road, right? Their products causing all kinds of harms or injuries. So you do a recall, you do an improvement, you make a better product. You don't just get rid of cars when the gas tanks were exploding back in the 70s. You made a better gas tank. You don't just get rid of every building materials because they had asbestos. You make a building material without asbestos, right? You improve it. But here, in an unprecedented move, Congress did something it's never done before or really never done since. It said to those 3 vaccine makers, hey, you know what, guys? You don't need to make a better, safer product. You don't need to improve it so you stop killing and injuring kids. Instead, we're just going to make it so that they can't sue you. and they can't hold you accountable and force you to make a better, safer product. We're going to make it so nobody can ever sue you on that basis again. Not only for those 3 products, but for any other childhood routine vaccine thereafter. And we've gone therefore from 3 injections in the first year of life, that's what the CDC schedule had in 1986, to now 29 injections, including in utero, by the first year of life. And every one of those products, save one, was licensed, trialed and licensed by a pharma company, knowing that they would never be held accountable for the injuries and deaths that they caused on the basis or that they could have made those products safer. That's a credible moral hazard. And I'll just put one final point on that to tie it back to clinical trials. And it's this: clinical trials are critical because after a vaccine is licensed, they say it's unethical to do a placebo-controlled trial. So you need that before it's licensed because you can't do it thereafter. It's the only way to really typically show causation between a claimed injury and a product. So
Proper trials, and they're not doing them.
And why? They do them with drugs. You know why? Because with drugs, they're liable after the product goes to market, and they don't want to lose money. They don't want to lose money when they sell drugs, cars, every other product. But with vaccines, they have the opposite financial incentive.
Yeah.
The more safety they do beforehand, the more likely to lose money.
So parents have to understand, when you say okay to a vaccine, you are actually taking all the liability on yourself. Because if your child is harmed, there's nowhere you can turn to. You have to take care of that child for the rest of their lives. You can't take the vaccine out, right? And they're supposed to do post-vaccine release surveillance for problems. And how's that been going? Because didn't the 1986 Act require a certain amount of reporting be done?
Yes, the 1986 Act required the creation what has effectively become the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, VAERS, which is a passive reporting system. And the CDC and our health authorities have done everything possible to say it's garbage and unreliable, right? They'll use it to say a vaccine doesn't cause a harm, but they'll never use it to say that a vaccine causes harm. They say you can't do that. The 86 Act also required the creation of something called vaccine information statements that are supposed to be given to the parent that, among other things, disclose certain risks from the vaccines. And those over time have been watered down. For example, in my book, I describe deposing the high priest of vaccinology, Dr. Stanley Plotkin. During his deposition, I showed him, for example, that the vaccine information statement produced by the CDC for the MMR vaccine literally says, as a risk, brain damage. It says brain damage. Those are the words it used, can be caused by the MMR vaccine. Well, he didn't like that. He actually, after the deposition, got the CDC to remove it. We have the internal emails from FOIA requests. So yes, there were some requirements under the 86 Act to track adverse events, but they've been incredibly watered down. And, one only need to look at the Institute of Medicine reports over the years to see they've basically utterly failed to study post-licensure safety of vaccines. I laid all that out in chapter 11 of my book.
Yeah. So the Institute of Medicine, which we doctors used to give a lot of credibility to, I mean, these were supposed to be the best of the best, tasks to find the world literature on this issue of vaccine safety. And I think you pressed them, right? Or you've done the deep dive to figure out that basically they can't come up with anything.
Oh, the irony, it wasn't me pressing them. The Institute of Medicine, for those who don't know, it's not part of government. It was created by Congress, but it's a private organization outside of government. Now, it's often contracted by government to do reviews of science. It's now called the National Academy of Medicine. The CDC and an agency called HRSA, which administers the vaccine injury program over at HHS, they paid a lot of money to the Institute of Medicine to review what they said were the 158 most commonly claimed vaccine injury pairs. So, people are claiming they had encephalopathy, brain damage from MR vaccine. You go down the list, okay? These are all serious injuries. And so the Institute of Medicine went and they did what they were paid to do. They went and reviewed the literature all of the literature to see, okay, can we rule out the vaccines causing these injuries? Obviously, that's what CDC and HRSA wanted the IOM to do. That's what they were paying them essentially do. Like, hey guys, rule these out, okay? The problem is that the Institute of Medicine, they can't just create stuff that doesn't exist. So for over 130 of those, the Institute of Medicine had no choice but to say, sorry, we can't reach a conclusion that the vaccine doesn't cause it because you guys haven't done the studies. We can't, there's no studies to even show this. So what we can't conclude it. So it's not me pressing them. The CDC and HRSA shot themselves in the foot effectively by commissioning this report, and the IOM coming back and saying, yeah, basically you folks haven't really done any post-licensure safety literature, even for over 130 of the 158 most commonly claimed injuries by your own admission. Those are the ones you say, and these are the ones that, by the way, often happen pretty quickly after vaccination. There's a lot of other injuries that are associated with vaccines. They just didn't need to pay IOM because they a lot more easily ignore them.
So we have no valid studies showing that vaccines are safe. You've got in your book that, this idea that vaccinology and vaccines are a religion. What are the key beliefs of those who subscribe to this?
Sure. So, and just to put it in context, if I may, people think of doctors as knowledgeable about vaccines, right? But the reality is that the folks who know about vaccines are the vaccinologists, and then doctors like you who've actually looked into it, who are very, very few, to your credit. Right. And the vaccinologists are this very small group of folks who conduct the clinical trials, who do most of the post-licensure safety for whatever it's worth in the little bit that's done. And they write the medical textbooks on vaccines. That is then what is used by the FDA to license vaccines, by the CDC to recommend vaccines, which then filters down to the rest of the medical community, and then is what the public looks to as the guidance on vaccines. So it all starts with the vaccinologists, right? What they do permeates down through the entire medical profession, the health agencies, and the public. Their beliefs are what critical. That's why I start the book by talking about them and showing through the deposition of the high priest of vaccinology, Dr. Stanley Prockin, really their leader, how they think. Here's how they think. Here are their beliefs. First of all, they approach vaccine safety as follows. If there's no data to show the vaccine doesn't cause the harm, you say the vaccine doesn't cause the harm. What you should say is, I don't know.
We don't know.
Because if you don't have data, you shouldn't say the vaccine doesn't cause the harm, but that's not the way they do it. They say the vaccine doesn't cause the harm. And I'll give you a real world example just from a month or two ago. At the last CDC ACIP meeting, the chief medical officer of the immunization safety office, the CDC, stood up and said to the world and to the CDC ACIP committee that the IOM found the Hep B vaccine was safe. Said something to that effect.
Wow.
Well, here's the crazy part. The IOM report, 20 of the 21 serious conditions that it reviewed that were the most commonly claimed injuries from the Hep B vaccine, it said, sorry, guys, you haven't done the studies. Don't know if it causes it, doesn't cause it. But yet, here you go. Here you have the chief medical officer at the CDC's immunization safety office saying that shows it is safe. That's ridiculous. That shows you don't know if it's safe at best.
Right.
At best. So that's a first belief. Another belief is that they engage in is that if you're going to validate a vaccine causes an injury, they want to have, not only are they want epidemiological studies proving it, they want biological studies, essentially. They want studies that show the biological mechanism of exactly how that vaccine causes an injury. But inversely, to show a vaccine has a benefit, they'll use the weakest, most ridiculous observational data they can find. So that's I could keep going, but that in a nutshell is how that religion works.
Absolute insanity. And that's why it's so hard to argue with these people, because I remember early on when I was starting to get my understanding of what was going on, they can hammer out, these high priests, whether it's Plotkin or Paul Offit or Peter Hotez, they can hammer out some details of their poorly done epidemiological studies that are flawed, but they know them so well they can bury you with irrelevant facts. It's kind of like tobacco science, right? They set those studies up to prove that there was nothing to see here.
I would very gladly get on a stage tomorrow with any one of them and go through those studies with them and debate them on it. I mean, they're not, you know, they're not hard to show how the underlying studies that they do rely upon do not support the safety of vaccines. They have a handful of them. So after I deposed Dr. Stanley Plotkin, you know, he went on this worldwide tirade, including trying to get the World Health Organization and getting them to declare, you know, vaccine hesitancy one of the 10 most, you know, leading risks in the world, dangers. He tried to have the package inserts for vaccines amended to include more clinical trial data. Failed at that because there is no placebos. There is no really. He got, like I told you, some stuff removed from the VAS, like brain damage. And one of the other things he did is he got, as far as I'm aware, the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, CHOP, where Paul Offit is, Dr. Paul Offit is, to create a whole library so that those who are going to be in his situation again can defend vaccine safety. Well, I appreciate, first of all, I'm honored that they create a whole library for that. But put that great honor aside. That library is the ultimate testament to the lack of foundation to support vaccine safety. The studies that are in that library are the epitome of either junk science, nonsensical, or irrelevant. And if somebody actually took the time to go through that library, it's not a lot, and looked at, okay, what are the studies they say that show the lunar adjuvants are safe? What are the studies that underlie, you know, go through it all. You're like, really? Oh my goodness. It raises the concern to a fever pitch.
Yeah. The studies are all flawed. And so how can you rely on them?
This is the best part. You're going to love this. Okay. When they conduct reviews of studies they don't like, they will say, well, it doesn't have an unvaccinated group, so they'll throw it out. I'm not kidding. I could show you innumerable examples of that, dozens. The AHRQ, the Agency for Health Research and Quality within HHS, did this entire review of vaccine safety. And basically said, well, you know what? If the study doesn't have an unvaccinated group, it's not really reliable. They said that. Yet, when the study supports the conclusion they want, all of a sudden they don't care about an unvaccinated group. Here's the thing, as you know, the studies that had an unvaccinated group, meaning science, you compare a group that got something exposed to unexposed. That's how you assess the safety of a product. The studies that have truly unexposed group, meaning kids with no vaccines, all show that they are far healthier than the kids who get vaccines, almost universally.
So true. That's what my study showed, and we've got now several that are showing the same thing.
I cite your study all the time.
Oh, thank you. Real world data. I mean, my analyst who got that data said, Paul, this is unbelievable. This is more powerful than any epidemiological study because it's real world data. You know these patients. And I did. And I saw it with my own eyes. That's why I'm so passionate about this topic, because I saw how incredibly healthy the unvaxxed kids were and what a disaster it's become to have kids follow the CDC schedule or even get a few vaccines. There's just no safety in any of them. But before I lose you, I know we're at a time restriction. Parents who are caught in this bind of they're in a state that only allows medical exemptions, but no doctor will give them a medical exemption. As an attorney, what can you advise they do?
In 45 states in the United States right now, you can get an exemption. You can get either a philosophical or religious exemption. And so, you know, I'm not aware, by the way, of a religion that if you believe doing something will harm your child, lets you do that. I'm not saying that you should write that as a reason. You should write, you know, the reasons that are, you know, true for you if you have to write anything. But in almost every one of those 45 states, it's just to check the box. Then there's West Virginia, which we are, where the state health department is issuing religious exemptions, but the school board is telling schools not to honor them, and we're in litigation right now. And we hope to have that issue fixed up pretty soon. So that leaves 4 states, really. That's New York, Maine, Connecticut, and California. And so if you're in one of those 4 states, it really varies by state what you can do. Now, I'm talking only about school. Like in New York State, for example, you can go to university with an exemption. That's still part of the law. In California, all the universities pretty much, except for a very few, grant religious exemptions. We sued the University of California system. And, after a number of suits, they finally restored the religious exemption to all 300,000 of their students. So we're just talking about school in these states pretty much. And, if you're in one of these states, in New York State, for example, the determination on whether you have, and I'm not giving legal advice directly to anybody, I'm just talking in general, if a school's, the arbiter of whether to accept the medical exemption is really the head of the school. So the head of a private school could choose to accept your medical exemption. Whereas in California, for example, you have to send it to the health department, and they conduct a review and basically, go on, either will go on to deny typically, and then go on an inquisition against the doctor that wrote it. So doctors don't even want to write one in California. So if you're in one of those 4 states, it is a tough. There are, there are different approaches. In California, for example, there are quote unquote these homeschool schools that will teach your child in a classroom setting, but only up to 49%, of the time. So they go to school, they sit in the class, it's just like school, but it's only up to 49% of the time. The rest of it is homeschooled, which also can involve, learning with others and so forth and whatnot. With all that said, we are currently, litigating and working very hard, supported by a Canyon, the nonprofit that I supports that work, to restore the exemption in those 4 remaining states. And we hope that will be a reality, in the coming years. I'll put it that way. The wheels of justice, as it were, turn slow, and it takes time to work your way through the court system. So not the most satisfactory answer, I know, but it depends on the state you're in. And even in Maine, there are differences between the private and the public schools. So, for the most part, really, with New York and Cali being the toughest places, you can go to school without having to get any vaccine if you want.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few contexts where it's not possible. I'll also mention that, we have an extensive exemption practice at my law firm. We have over 50 people that just do vaccine related work. So like we have, for example, we have, 3 immigration attorneys, in large part help people immigrate legally, obviously, get waivers for vaccination. We've gotten, I think, over 700 of those, virtually. Wow. Almost.
That is fantastic. How do people get a hold of that service?
Oh, well, SiriLLP.com is my law firm's website. And, we help people with immigration exemptions. We help with school exemptions, university, and, clinical rotations are a big issue, because while the school is, might have an exemption and the hospital might have an exemption because they have to under Title VII, when you're a clinical rotation, you're not in school and you're not an employee. So you're like in this netherworld. So we help people get exemptions in that weird context. And we also do immigration exemptions. So we help folks in all of those areas. If they want, they can go to our website. We also have a lot of free resources on our website. So you can just take a look at it, on the exemption page and see if any of that's helpful as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that work. Your representation is available in all 50 states, or is it limited to certain states?
Well, we represent people injured by vaccines in all 50 states. We have a lot of folks at the firm. We are in, our attorneys are licensed in almost, a large majority of the states, including the most populous ones. So I've never done the math, but I think it's like 80% of the American population. We got licensed. So we're able to help folks in most parts of the country, depending on the issue.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Aaron. You are one of my heroes for sure. I appreciate all the work you're doing. People, you have got to go and get this book. This is a masterpiece. Thank you for doing that. And there's something special about an attorney. I learned from you, actually, that when an attorney is prepared and you go into court and cross-examine or do discovery, you are really getting to the bottom of it. You're getting to the truth. People are afraid to lie under oath. in a legal environment, whereas we get lied to all the time in the system. Thank you for
Yeah.
holding people's feet to the fire and getting to the truth.
Yeah, there's a difference between what public health authorities tell you, the public, and what they say under oath in a deposition, or what they have to admit when you force them to provide the proof or evidence for their claims. Man, those are two different worlds. That's basically my whole book in a nutshell. I think you just summed it up. And really, thank you for being brave. And, as an attorney, if I speak out on vaccines, I don't have a medical board that's going to come after me. I don't have, that pressure and constant threat. Whereas you, especially as a pediatrician, it takes a lot to look back and introspectively say, hey, maybe I need to change course. And you did that. And if every doctor, was willing to do that, who's engaged in these products, this thing was changed. So thank you for sticking your neck out, literally sticking it out to the the guillotine of medical boards. And that's really what they are. They are the judge, they're the jury, the executioner. They are, and there's almost no judicial review, unfortunately, in the state that you were in. So they can basically, for the most part, act with impunity. I mean, and they did. And but you stood strong, and I do remember that process. And I was like, I love this guy. He is not giving up. He does not care. He will stand for what's right. So God bless you.
I was willing to go down fighting, but you knocked some common sense into my head. And I do thank you for that, because we want to be effective. We want to do what works. And what you're offering now with this new book, and then all the work you continue to do, it's a gift to the world. Thank you, Aaron, for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, folks, you can find me at kidsfirstforever.com. You can get coaching from none other than yours truly, myself, and just a mom, Dee Dee Hoover. My new book with co-author Dee Dee Hoover is available and is a very important book, Vax Facts. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Okay, we're live. Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Alice, and I live in Eugene, Oregon.
And the most exciting thing about you sitting here right now is you're alive.
That's pretty exciting. Yes.
Surviving a hospital protocol.
Yes.
We've had a few people have come on and done this, so you're not the first, but I'm so pleased to see you. So first question I'm going to ask you, did you take the COVID shot?
I did not. I felt with every inch of my being that I couldn't do it. And I even I felt so strongly that, it was being pushed on people. I went to rallies. My own family was, I'm self-employed. So I was actually on unemployment, which was glorious because I just hiked every day. But my own family was under great pressure to get it. And I was so troubled that, they would have this dangerous intervention pushed on them. So I tried to speak up and do anything I could do to try to change things, but I think it was bigger than me.
So did you have a pulsometer thing on your finger?
I did, yes,
Right.
yes. But when I got sick with COVID, I had gotten it off of eBay for like 99 cents. So when my oxygen started to drop, I kind of figured it was a junk.
99 cents?
Oh yeah, it was cheap. I was like, well, we should probably have this. And then when my oxygen was dropping, I thought, oh, this thing's broken. It's so yeah, I wasn't as alarmed as I probably should have been. Yes.
And what made you go into hospital?
So I had been sick with it for about a week. The strange thing about the virus is it's really dreamy. At least for me, it was. I had a fever, but I didn't feel it. I was really kind of in a floaty little world. I did not know how sick I was. My sister is a physician, and after I'd had it for over a week, I noticed one day I stood up to walk across the house and I couldn't really get a good breath. And then I started to get pretty scared. And we didn't have any monoclonal antibodies in that time in Oregon. It was Delta time. That's when I got it. And my sister said, come up to Washington, which is where she lives. And she said, we'll get you the monoclonal antibodies up here. There's a clinic getting them. So we drove up. But by the time I got there, my lips were blue and my oxygen was about 78. So they said, no antibodies, you're going straight to the hospital. So I was not even hospitalized in my hometown.
All right, and did they give you a COVID test when you got?
They did, and it was the first test I'd ever taken. So, but I knew I had it. And it was when you checked into the emergency room, they had you wait outside, and it was hot summer. So it was 95 degrees. It was early September. So and people were passing out. We were all just in folding chairs waiting to be seen. They got me on a cannula of oxygen, and it did raise my oxygen a little, but not a lot. So.
Did they ask you if you'd had the vaccine?
I believe they did. Yeah. And I of course said no. Yes. But I was in a really dreamy state. So when it came time, I mean, clearly they were going to admit me. There was no getting out of that. And when they said they'd be giving me remdesivir, I kind of remember I shouldn't have this, but I don't know why. Because I was really in a, it was kind of a half sleepy state. So I got signed up for the protocols right away.
Okay, and so you were on remdesivir?
Yes, yes.
Tell us the story.
I should say, when I was at home ill, I kept noticing that my legs hurt a lot, and it kind of felt like I had gone for a long hike. It was kind of a deep muscular feeling. And this is odd. I haven't gone for a hike. Turns out I was developing blood clots from the virus. So when I got into the hospital, they were giving me a prophylactic dose of blood thinners, but this was one of the big problems that I had. I was recovering a little bit. I was doing pretty well on the remdesivir. And I should also say, before I got sick, I was living a really healthy lifestyle because I thought that was my best weapon to escape being sick. And I was never afraid of the virus, not one time. I never had a moment of fear about it. So I was running 5 miles a day, and I was eating no carbs or low carbs and organic homemade food, and I was taking all the vitamins. So I was really a little baffled that I got so sick from it because I was doing everything right. In the end, I think that probably is what saved me, though, that I had been living such a good, wholesome lifestyle.
So how did you get out? What happened?
Get out of the hospital? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I was there for 6 weeks. So we started, I was just on a cannula of oxygen, and that started my oxygen kept dropping, and so they started doing high flow, which is it's like a turbo wind blowing in your face. And then I was doing all right. And it was about a weekend, I was done with the remdesivir, and they were thinking I was going to be able to leave pretty soon. But then one night I felt this terrible pain in my back. And I was like, oh my God, did I pull a muscle? I need help. So I called a nurse in, and turned out I had passed a blood clot to my lungs because I'd been clotting all over. So that was when the emergency stuff began to happen. So my lungs were still pretty white. They call it ground glass when you have a lot of inflammation. So they weren't great, but the blood clot was what just tanked me. So that's when they decided to intubate me because my lungs were they were really struggling. So, and at that point, I think the first week of intubation, this is when things get really foggy. I was on a lot of drugs, but I was in and out of consciousness. And they thought I was improving. One day they kept having to give me breathing tests to see if I could breathe on my own. So one day they had me breathe on my own for 12 hours, and that is when I failed completely. And then they had to talk about things like ECMO beds, and they decided to fully sedate me in like an induced coma. So I was completely out. So I was on, and at that point the drugs got pretty serious. They were fentanyl and Versed and ketamine too. So yeah, I was in a paralytic state for a couple of weeks at that point, and it was not looking good.
Any of that 'cause you were out, right?
I have strange memories before. They're really dreamy, and I'm still trying to piece together quite what happened. But when I went under, and now ketamine is a hallucinogenic, so I'm a really lucid dreamer, and I meditate a lot. So I'm really used to going to fantastical worlds in my dreams or my meditations. So I think it was really easy for me to slip into these states when I was unconscious. And I reached a point where they told my family that I was not going to make it, and they needed to be ready at any point, not even to say goodbye. And here I go, getting a little choked up, but say goodbye over video conference or something, because I wasn't allowed to see anyone. Everyone was in hazmat suits, so it was a very isolated experience. And I think that is the point where I had visions. They started off in a dreamy place, and the first one is I kind of was in this dream world where I realized I wasn't even a human. I was a little baby bear, and I was like, oh, I'm adorable. I'm a wonderful little bear. And I was running around the forest as a bear and doing bear things, digging, climbing trees, eating berries. And time in these states of mine are very, not like we experience here. So I lived an entire life as a bear, and then I died, and this spark of light came out of me, and it was like, it almost looked like a DNA swirl, actually. And it was this beautiful translucent spark of light that just swirled out, and it swirled through the forest, and it went into a deer. And then I was like, I'm a deer. And then
these are strong drugs they got you.
Oh yeah. I was, but it was beautiful. so yeah, I experienced all these forest animals, and at the end I heard a voice, my inner voice, it was me, say, it's always you. You're the light, and you just put on different costumes. Don't worry about it. Everything, you will always be. You will always be. And that was beautiful, because I had some very terrifying visions too. They were very frightening, and I'm not going to share those. But and I think that's the point where my body was failing, and then I think I did have a near-death experience. I thought they had taken me outside, because I thought I saw the rising sun, and it was gold and white, and the sky was blue and purple, little poofy clouds, and I was ecstatic to be outside. And then I heard a voice say, do you want to go be with that light? And I was like, that light is beautiful. And so the voice said, if you want to go, everything will be okay. It will not hurt. Don't worry. And just start to move. And I could not move. I could not move at all. I tried, and everything then just dimmed. And I think that was my offer to go. But it clearly wasn't my time. So I got a little extra time.
Do you have post-traumatic stress from this?
Definitely. Oh yes.
I mean, you look like you've got this wonderful big smile and everything, so it looks like you've got everything under control, but I can't imagine.
It's been a journey. I mean, the hospital experience, there was a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of loneliness and fear. I'm working through it. But my body itself, when I got out of the hospital, I couldn't walk, because when you've been in a paralytic state, I was in there for 6 weeks, and I was on a ventilator for 3 of those 6. And they told me I was only the 3rd person that survived. So
how did you get it? Why they didn't let anybody else out? So why did they let you out?
Well, I honestly think a miracle happened for me. I had a young doctor. He said she's failing. Why don't we just pull her off all the drugs and see what happens? And that's what happened. They unplugged the pipeline of drugs. I don't even know what I was on, but it was a lot. And I started to improve. And then they were able to unintubate me. And then I got to go on the high flow oxygen, and then a cannula, and there we go. And so, after they unintubated me, I think it was only about a week that I just bounced back. So
did someone come and pick you up at home?
Oh yes. They wanted me to go to a long-term care facility, because, like I said, I couldn't walk. I still needed some oxygen, and they kind of thought my lungs would never repair, because they were horrible. My lungs were pure white.
And you're on no oxygen now at all?
Oh no. So I stayed with my sister, who took excellent care of me, and I think the love helped a lot. My family from Eugene, of course, came and got me then, and then my recovery. It was really hard. It reactivated. I have a chronic pain condition, which is pretty bad. And it reactivated that. I had it in remission. So it's been a journey to suppress that too, but it's on its way out as well. So when I got home, I had a walker, but every day I had my husband drive me to the forest, and I took my walker up a trail every day, and because I just made it a little further every day, and within a month I was hiking a mile, and then 2, and now so I think being in nature, I think it healed me. Yes.
This is wonderful. I'm so pleased you're here today. Is there anything you want to tell the people?
Well, I think there's 2 things, and I think well, first of all, there's been so much harm with the vaccine, and we're all really focused on it because we know that humans did that. We know they did that to us. You know, I think there's people that don't even believe that there is a virus. After going through what I did, I have to believe that there's something going on. I think the important thing is, even though the public doesn't universally agree, I think we all suspect that the virus itself was manipulated by humans. And I think it all started with that, and it did great. That beginning point did such great harm to so many people. And so I think we need to be very wary of that, because I think it could happen again. and we don't ever want to do this again. And then I think the other thing that I'd like to say is, I know and I'm going to get choked up, so many people have sat in this seat where I'm sitting because they've lost people they really love. And coming so near to death from this, I think the message I want to give is, it was probably really easy for your loved ones. We're all going to go, and it's okay when we do. And we're going to go when it's our time. And I'm sure the people that died from this suffered a lot, but because there is a point of complete surrender when you're that ill in the hospital. And when you get to that point of complete surrender, you're in greater hands. And when it's time to go, those greater hands gently take you. So I think that's one of the main messages, that there's been a lot of pain, but those beautiful souls, they're okay.
Well, thank you so much for being so brave.
Thank you. Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.